Our country is headed towards bankruptcy if we don't get our arms around this.
The more we got into the numbers, we realized we weren't doing it for our grandkids. You know, we weren't even doing it for our kids. We were doing it for us. That's how dire the problem is.
Our long-term debt has grown so large. If we wiped away all discretionary spending this year, we'd still borrow money. So long-term, it doesn't look good.
That it's already hurting us. The evidence is that countries with the U.S. level of indebtedness grow more slowly, say a percentage point per year on average. Right now, that's 1 million jobs, and that's something we should care about.
The federal debt crowds out federal investments in cities. Bottom line.
Every dollar we spent last year on these 2 wars, on national defense, homeland security, education, infrastructure, high value added research, every single dollar was borrowed, and half of it was borrowed from foreign countries. That is a formula for failure in anybody's book.
The basic problem is getting the debt under control so it's not growing faster than the economy in the long run, but doing it in a way so that it doesn't threaten the recovery which we need to get people back to work.
There are lots of solutions to our long-term debt problem.
We're going to have to reform our tax code to generate more revenues. We're going to have to change our entitlement programs to make them sustainable over a 50-year time period. And we're going to have to look closer at both defense spending and domestic spending on ways that we can pare it back.
We need to reduce spending. We're spending way too much money in Washington. But reducing spending alone won't solve the problem. We also need to reform entitlements. That's where the real money is, in Medicare and Medicaid and all of our other entitlement programs.
Social Security, which has gotten so much attention over the years, there are probably 6 plans that, roughly speaking, do the same thing. You could put them in a hat, pull one out at random, I'd be happy. And I think most Americans would be happy.
You're going to have to figure out a way to get revenues increased, because now our revenues coming into Washington are about 14.5% of GDP. That's as low as it's ever been, and we've got to make sure that we figure out the right way to get those revenues up. The best way to do that is through a total reform of the tax code.
We have to do this in a sensible way. We have to do it in a way that still allows our economy to grow. If we simply cut a lot of spending or dramatically raise taxes without also a willingness to invest, then we're going to have the same reaction we've seen in some of the countries in Europe that simply drives up unemployment. So we have to do this in a thoughtful way.
The good news is America has the resources to meet this challenge if we have the courage and the political will to do so. This is going to be the perfect fiscal storm between the election and the next Congress.
There are a whole group of forcing actions, things that nobody wants to have happen, but which will happen if the Congress does nothing.
Something has to happen on the debt limit because, boom, it's there. Sequestration, something happens, otherwise it's carried out. You have to do something, otherwise tax increases will come.
So all of this fiscal storm, this challenge that will confront us, this adverse impact to the economy if we don't reach an agreement, will be a motivation, hopefully, for us to act positively and to come together and make an agreement for positive action.
So I'm hopeful that there'll be at least some of the foundation laid for how we're going to address these problems between now and the election. It's going to require real leadership, and it's going to require the involvement of both presidential nominees who have got to rise up and say, look, the problem is so serious that we think it needs to be addressed, and here's the way it should be addressed. That's what I'm hoping for.
I believe there's 75 senators that would vote for a grand bargain. You know, what we need is we need folks outside of Washington in business and community organizations to demand that we stand up and do that and reinforce those members in both parties who do the right thing.
Are we really serious about the way we're going to govern this country? Is it going to be the right way? Or are we just going to kick the can down the road, as we have done far too many times, and say, well, we as a country have survived to this point and somehow we'll get through it. It's not going to happen in this case.
Politics can do big and great things. It can do them for good, and sometimes it can do them for bad. And I think that we're in a time period here where people are looking at what are our values? What do we really stand for? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we in fact moving forward? I think we are.
I think Americans have always been a very pragmatic people. It's easy to see the partisan and ideological divides in the moment, but if you look over the long scope of history, we solve problems, and we will solve these problems as we have in the past.
This is our generation's test. You know, can we make a sacrifice? You know, we've had it pretty good in this generation. We've been asked to make few sacrifices. We've got to make some sacrifices if we want to hand the next generation a country that's as good as the one we inherited.
Americans, when it really gets tough, and there really is no alternative, have shown over time they're prepared to do the tough things to get their country on the right track. And that ought to make us optimistic because the American people are resilient people, a smart people, a tough people when it comes to the final crisis that they have to overcome.
Debt and deficit issues, whether we like it or not, have become a proxy for whether our institutions are up to governing in the 21st century. And the solutions that are demanded, small changes in our entitlement programs, a fairer tax code, you know, this isn't putting a man on the moon or defeating communism. If we get this fixed, the confidence that we'll build in the American public, in our governing institutions, in their future and their kids' future, will be actually the greatest value we'll have.
I understand the need for government and why it's important and why it helps our country run properly. I just want it to run better.
Why we can't be running this country like a well-oiled machine, like a business, like all of the people that are making America thrive is just baffling to me. 15 trillion? I mean, that's like in Austin Powers, like $1 kajillion. Seriously, what does that even look like? How do you get to that point? That's just out of control.
But the frustrating part for the man on the street like me is it seems like the competition, the winning part is, or how you win or how bad you make your opponent look is more important than the actual getting something done part.
As a community, as a society, we all have to understand we're all going to have to give a little bit. You cannot continue spending at this level and expect there not to be a problem down the road.
I just feel like the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and it's people like me who work hard every day that keep this country afloat.
I think those who have the ability to make financial sacrifices, including the possible increase of taxes, need to do so.
I represent the common average cat. I don't make a lot of money, but I'm not broke. So I'm living check to check. So that's the sacrifice right there. Being able to put my bills together, not to go over and not to go under, so I can continue to live to the next check. So actually, every time I get paid, it's a sacrifice. Because when I get paid, it's gone. So there you go.
Meeting in the middle is not always the right answer, but I do believe that the problem is so big that it's going to take a variety of elements in a solution to come up with something that works, and that's going to necessarily mean compromise.
I mean, nobody can be happy 100% of the time. We have to find out, and we all have to do what's best for the country, not just what's best for us. I think, you know, Kennedy said it best, ask not what you can do for myself, but for my country. It's a little paraphrasing.
Let's forget about political affiliation and, taxing the rich and giving to the poor. Whatever needs to be done, let's just take a look at it and let's do what's fair and equitable and not take such a political stand in which it's more of a power struggle than what's right for the country.
You can't have trillion-dollar debts every year and not in the long term have a consequence. And that consequence will come in the next 4 or 5 years, just when my girls get out of college, and they're going to be hit terribly hard with higher tax rates and high interest rates.
There are certain groups who have, multi-million-dollar income. If we take a couple $1,000,000 in tax from them, they're still going to have a couple $1,000,000. Their life is still going to be really, really great. They're not living paycheck to paycheck. They still have a vacation home and a Ferrari.
I've been telling people for years that if we could go back about 50 years ago when I was a kid, things seemed to actually work in those days. People were accountable for what they did. My parents' generation didn't buy things on credit. They paid cash. It sounds pretty basic, but it actually worked.
Right now, we're doing this outrageous spending, and we're basically strapping it to our kids, many of whom aren't even born yet, so that when they grow up, they're going to be shackled to this immense debt that we wound up shackling them to.
I haven't really heard a fiscal plan that is responsible from either party. So people on the right don't seem to understand that we need to cut defense, and the people on the left don't seem to understand a practical way to cut entitlements. So I haven't seen anything fiscally responsible from either side.
The only way a government's going to work together is we all work together. That's why we have the problems we have now. Everybody thinks their agenda is better than the others when they're forgetting about the people, that we are their agenda.
They keep extending the debt, they keep extending the budget. I mean, it's like, gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. It's not going to work.